Chris Mamula. He's a physical therapist that retired last year at age 41 from a traditional outpatient PT job. I really love Chris's story because I think that a lot of you guys that follow me on Physical Therapist, you know that I write a lot about personal finance, and but my story is a little hard to relate with. Oops. For most people. And so I think Chris's story is much more relatable. So hopefully he can share some insight, give some words of wisdom to you guys, and I would love to introduce you guys to him. So Chris, if you could just give a little background about yourself. I know that I first found you a couple years ago. I originally thought that I was the only physical therapist out there with a personal finance and financial independence website. And then I found Chris's website, and he had started way before me, and his content was way better than mine. So so that was a little disappointing.
Thanks for the kind words. So yeah, I grew up in Western Pennsylvania, kind of like a depressed steel town. So my wife and I both came from middle to lower middle class families. And my parents, kind of always impressed on me to go to college. So I kind of followed that standard path. And I was a high school athlete, and that's how I discovered physical therapy. And I decided I wanted to get into sports medicine. So I was an athletic trainer and physical therapist, and I got out of school in 2001 from the University of Pittsburgh. And from that point, I liked my career at first. And I think like a lot of PTs, it kind of wears on you. It gets repetitive, the whole, just the administrative aspect. And I started to want to look for something different. But I never really believed that, normal people like us from normal backgrounds with normal jobs can retire early. And like I worked closely with orthopedic surgeons who I knew made 3-4 times what I did, and none of them were retiring early. So like, how would I possibly do it? And then I found this Financial Independence Retire Early blogs. And it just kind of like my mind just exploded. And I saw this community of people that had similar thoughts and ideas to me. But I didn't see anybody that kind of looked like me. It was kind of all like engineers, like spreadsheet junkies, and like people that kind of finance seemed to come naturally to them. And none of that described me. Like I think I have a pretty standard background for physical therapists, in that I went to school for, between kindergarten and my master's 20 years and never had a class on personal finance or investing, so it was all about learning how to make money, but never what to do with it. And then I found these FIRE blogs, and I went deep down that rabbit hole. And so I decided to start my own blog to kind of just to tell a different version of this story, and to kind of try to reach other people. And that's how Jared and I ended up connecting probably 5 years ago now, I guess. So
it's been a while. Yeah, that was I really, really enjoyed Eat the Financial Elephant was your original website. I really enjoyed those articles. And you wrote that guest post for me. That's still one of my most popular articles, and which is kind of sad for me, but but your writing is really, really great. I remember when you wrote that article, Whitney edited it and was like, wow, he's a really good writer. And I was like, yeah, he's a really good writer. So I really appreciate that. So you said that, you worked a traditional outpatient job. What was the course of your career like? Did you work in several different clinics throughout your time, or did you stay in one clinic? And, how was that progression?
Yeah, so I got out of school in 2001, and I was in Pittsburgh, and there was kind of a couple of things going on at that time. There was a law change, and they capped the benefits on physical therapy. So there was a ton of physical therapists coming out. And in Pittsburgh, we have 3 physical therapy schools right in the city, and then West Virginia University and Slippery Rock are on either side. So there was just a big glut of physical therapists. So I actually started only making about $40,000 a year as a therapist. And so I did that for about a year working in the city. And then I moved about an hour outside of the city to a practice that was just starting. And it was awesome. I loved it. But I was driving like an hour each way every day, and I was just burning out really fast. So then I lasted only about a year at that job. And so I was on my 3rd job in like 3 years. But we moved back to my hometown, and we found a small private outpatient sports medicine practice. It was just perfect for what I wanted. And had a lot of autonomy, and I couldn't really have a better practice setting. So I ended up staying there for like the last 14, 15 years of my career.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. If you could find a good setting like that, a job you enjoy. I mean, like you were talking about earlier, there's a lot of burnout in the physical therapy world. And that's something that I've really started writing a lot about, trying to like let people know that there's other paths. You don't have to just go the traditional route if that doesn't make you happy. And I think your path is definitely more the more the standard. And it's amazing that you were able to do what you did, going down that path. So I think that's wonderful for people to hear. But there's definitely multiple options, and I try to really write a lot about that to let people know that you don't have to go the traditional route. You don't have to go go through that burnout. Did you really feel like you were burning out by the end of your career? I know you mentioned that.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was starting to just get tired of doing physical therapy. And so my wife and I, we kind of really got heavily involved in the outdoors community, like rock climbing, skiing, mountaineering, that kind of stuff. And so what we were going to just kind of do, like we had no financial literacy, we had no real plan, and we were just going to kind of wing it. And so my wife got a job with a company called Black Diamond in Salt Lake City, Utah, and they manufacture like climbing gear and backcountry ski gear. So for her, it was kind of a dream job, and it kind of gave us this outdoor community because we didn't really know anybody out here. And so we were going to do that, and I was just going to quit my job and maybe work a little part-time or maybe kind of be a ski bum. Like I said, we had no plan. And then after like 12 years of marriage, right as this was happening, like literally in the same week that my wife got her job offer, she found out she was pregnant. And so I was like, man, like we have like a new life to be responsible for, and we can't just wing it. And
Yeah,
so
that changes everything.
Yeah, so that was kind of my light bulb moment where I got really serious about the whole personal finance thing and learned investing and learned tax planning and learned retirement planning and all that stuff that I kind of thought was over my head. And then once I started looking into it, I mean, I found it, most of it is just really simple, like 8th grade math. And mostly it's just making different choices and a few behavioral things. And it's really just not that hard. And it's something that I think almost anybody can do if you put your mind to it.
Yeah, I really think you're right about that. Like I said, I write a lot about travel PT, and that's not for everybody. We were just, a couple days ago at Student Conclave, and I think about maybe a fourth of the people there are even interested in travel. So there's a huge part of my audience that I'm really missing out on there. And I really, really appreciate your story. So in terms of salary, like I was talking about, travel PTs, they make a lot of money. And so that kind of throws a wrench in what I did in terms of if you can't go that route. So in terms of salary, like what was your starting salary? How did that progress over time? And then what did you end at? If you don't mind talking about it.
No, I'm fine to talk about that. So like I said, I started at only about $40,000 starting, which I think is extremely low for most therapists. But at the time and in that location, that's kind of where it was. And then I quickly, by moving out of the city, I probably jumped to 60,000 like after a year. And then moving back to my hometown, I ended up topping out at probably like 80 or 90,000. And
Okay.
that was working full time as a physical therapist. And also I was doing contracting as an athletic trainer. So I was working a lot of hours to do that. But it was a nice lifestyle because I worked a lot on like some weekends, but then I was able to get a lot of comp time, and I had a pretty nice lifestyle with it, and like I said, a lot of autonomy with my job, and really nice patient load where it wasn't a lot of chronic pain and stuff. It was a lot of post-op orthopedics and sports injuries and stuff that I was really interested in, and so
That's
it was
awesome.
pretty ideal for me. Yeah, so I was able to like not focus on making as much as maybe I could have. But I still did okay, but really kind of focusing on doing the stuff that I wanted to do, which was nice.
Yeah, that ending salary, I think that's really good for PTs in most locations. What was the cost of living like in the area you guys were living?
So Pittsburgh is the closest big city, and that's one of the lower cost metropolitan areas. And then I was about 2 hours out, so it was a lower cost of living, which was a big boost for us because for a healthcare provider, we were just in demand. It was hard for them. Like I know when I quit, like I said, I've been there for 15 years. And so it wasn't like going in and like, I'm leaving and giving a 2-week notice. I actually gave like an 8-month notice, and they still had a hard time finding like the replacement for me that they wanted. Cause it was just kind of hard to recruit people to this small town. So I think that's a pretty good trick, like a geo arbitrage where you can take your skills as a therapist or really any medical professional if people are watching. And because you're in more demand, you can command a higher salary and kind of negotiate for better conditions. And at the same time, your cost of living is lower, so that money goes further. So it's kind of a big win-win that people in the healthcare field can use.
I think that's a really good point. So I write about that a lot on our website with travel, because those areas like you're talking about that are hard to fill, a lot of times they need travel therapists, and they pay really well. The cost of living is really low. So we always look for those small rural towns. And I know, like, for example, my first travel job ever was at this clinic that hadn't had a full-time therapist for about 7 years. And they'd been advertising that job consistently. So they had taken travelers all that time. So they were paying really high. Cost of living was extremely low. And I think those are, if you're in a situation where you can be away from like a big city, then I think that's a good path to go for sure.
Yeah.
So what about, do you have something to say there?
I was just going to add in, like, I think like people think like there's people don't want to go there for a reason. And like for us, like for one thing, what drew us there, our family was there. So that kind of made it nice. We were close to both of my wife and my family. And then the other thing is like, if depends what you're into. Like, so again, we were into more outdoor activities. So, I mean, like, so since I've retired, like we've moved west and we live in Utah now. So it's not like the same, but I mean, there was decent skiing. It was okay. Like an hour from our house, there was a lot of good hiking, some climbing, and again, just kind of there's a lot of other opportunities. Like I ended up as a rock wall instructor at a local tiny university because, again, there's just not a lot of people there that could do that. So, I mean, I was able to make a fair amount of money on a little side job, just doing something really fun and basically had my own gym. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of perks if you're willing to leave the big city or the super desirable area. You can, it's kind of like anything, it's what you make of it. And you can find some pretty cool opportunities if you're willing to look and go outside of those, those prime locations.
Yeah, I think all along the Appalachian Mountains, they run through Southwest Virginia where we're from, and there's a lot of opportunity there, and there's a lot of good hiking, nice rivers. You can make a cool lifestyle out of it, just depending on what you want.
Yeah, for sure.
So let's get into your financial choices. So for me, I've written about this before, but I've always been kind of like a finance nerd, I guess. I've always been a saver. I don't know why that was, but even as far back as I can remember, like 3 or 4 years old, I would save money and want to put it in the bank and stuff like that. So was that you at all, or how did you grow up?
I definitely didn't have any sophistication as far as finance goes, but like for me, like my parents just beat it into me like from as early as I can remember that like debt is just something you don't do. So you do everything you can to avoid debt. And so I was in a very rare position. I was able to get through PT school with no debt through a combination of I worked all through my undergrad and through grad school. I had some help from my parents on my undergrad, and then I got a scholarship for a substantial portion of my grad school. So I was pretty lucky and but also intentional about that. And then my wife came from a family where her parents just couldn't help her at all. But she got through school probably about $20,000 in debt. Just again, she worked full time while going to school full time. So we definitely put in a lot of work and effort up front, but it paid off because it gave us just so many options. Like we were basically debt free within a couple of months of me starting my job. And then we had a lot of freedom going forward. And we did that just by basically starting off living off my wife's salary. And I was trying to get her out of debt with everything I was making. And that worked really well. So that's kind of what we did our whole lives is we lived off her salary. And just so people don't think like she was making $1 million, she was not a physical therapist, but we had really parallel career paths. And we kind of made pretty similar money the whole time. So basically we were saving 50% of our income to give some perspective.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
You did that pretty much from the beginning.
Yeah, really, even before, like while I was in grad school, I was working. And so I maybe made, I don't know, doing some like paid internships type stuff and working as a PT aide. I maybe made $15,000 that year. I mean, I was working a good bit, but I wasn't making much money. And, but I was putting that all towards her income. So yeah, even before I was making a regular salary, we were living off hers and using mine. And then once we had basically even salaries, we were saving that 50%.
Awesome. That's really good. I mean, I think that is a huge goal number for most people. Trying to get to like 50% would be, between a couple. If you can live on one income and save the other income, that is a wonderful goal to shoot for. So we got a bunch of people in here. I think we got about 45 people right now. If you guys have any questions for Chris or I, definitely feel free to ask. We're still going to keep going with the finances though. So in terms of, you said you found the financial independence community. I know that for me, I kind of went into when I found financial independence, went into it with not really a clear goal or a reason why. What was your reason for really wanting to get to financial independence? And was it more just freedom, or was it, specific things you wanted to do, or what was your why of FI, so to say?
Yeah, so it was definitely always freedom. Initially, it was that freedom. So we started getting into, like I said, we didn't live a real frugal lifestyle. We started getting into climbing and skiing and some of that stuff. I mean, you can make it as expensive or as inexpensive as you want, but we actually started getting into high altitude mountaineering. And so if you're doing that, like you're traveling, like we went to Ecuador, we went to central Mexico, we've been to Africa. And so you're spending a couple of days just traveling, and then you have to acclimate. So it takes 2 or 3 weeks. And that was basically eating our whole vacation time just to do one trip. So it was all about just having freedom and flexibility. And so we were just we had a relatively low lifestyle because we just were lived that dirtbag ski bum lifestyle, I guess. And we didn't have the fancy cars. We didn't have the fancy house, but we were doing the stuff that we really wanted. And then the thing that really, again, got us serious is, having another life, having my daughter. And that's when we got really serious and defined our goals and got serious about how much we needed and how that was all going to work.
That's awesome. I think that might be my favorite article on your old website was the Dirtbag Millionaire. That was a really good article. I really, that resonated with me a lot at the time because I didn't really have any clear goals, and I was like, okay, well, what am I going to do when I get there? And I think that was a good, very good article. So you didn't plan to retire early from the beginning. How far was it into your career that you kind of figured out that that's what you were going to do?
Yeah, so I can tell you 2001, I graduated, and it was probably around that same time in May when we found out that was when the whole thing happened with my wife getting the job offer and finding out our daughter was pregnant. So it was like 11 years of saving, but making a lot of mistakes, not really having a clue, just kind of basically saving because it felt good and saving because we knew we wanted to do something different, but didn't really think like retirement was possible. And then from 2012 to 2017, it was like really 5 years of like kind of I guess you kind of say a hard sprint, but honestly, that's not even true because like after our daughter was born, my wife cut back to part-time work and she's never gone back to full-time work. So, it was a hard sprint as far as getting serious about our finances, but and I cut back. I quit being an athletic trainer at that point. I cut back all those hours. So we already had the foundation by having this big savings rate by saving one of our salaries. So it was really more fine tuning, and we started saving like these numbers are going to sound big if you're not a saver and you're not an investor, but probably $10,000 a year in taxes that we had been paying unnecessarily, and another $10,000 in investing fees. So, they're big numbers and they're not exaggeration. If anything, that's maybe understating it, just because of the magnitude of the changes you can make by just having some sense of what you're doing with your finances.
Yeah, I think I didn't have this on the list, but I think that's a great thing to talk about. I was lucky in that I basically started researching a lot when I was still in school, and I avoided a lot of those investing fees. And I know you've written a lot about that. For people that are, just starting out, what would you say to them in terms of, their own investing? I think it was you had a financial advisor; those fees were through, right?
Yes. So I think for most people, like we talked about, like I went to school, K to 12. 4 years of bachelor's. I had 2 years of master's at the time. So basically 20 years, and I never had any education. So I think for most people, when you get educated, it's like the person that's running your 401k, maybe for your company, will come in and do a talk, or you go sit down with an advisor, and there's just so many conflicts. So you have to step back and understand that. And everybody makes investing so difficult because they have a lot of incentive to do so, because they're making their money by selling products, and charging you a commission on them. And so if you know what you're doing, you're not going to buy those products. So they want to make it. And then even the quote unquote good guys who are just kind of selling advice, there's incentives to make that complicated. So you can't do it yourself and you have to pay them for advice. And really, it is just so simple. If you just follow a really simple strategy of basically what I recommend is using index funds. So very low fees, very low taxes, using your 401k. Through your work provider, so you get a tax deduction in the year you take it, and then all your investments are tax free until you take them out. Just really, really simple things that really anybody can do. And if you read 2 or 3 books, and you probably don't even need to read that many, but you're going to kind of reinforce things. You probably could read 1 book and you'd be okay. And just by doing those things, literally, like I said, I gave you the numbers, and again, that's not an exaggeration. So it's life changing.
I think that's an extremely good point. The financial industry is confusing because that's how they profit, and I can't tell you how many people I've talked to that ask questions and they just think that it's so complicated. And it really, I always say it's only as complicated as you make it. It doesn't have to be complicated, but you can make very complicated plans. But the weird part about that is usually the complexity doesn't really lead to a lot more return. So a lot of times making things simple is the way to go. And I think there's probably a handful of books that you can read and have a pretty good understanding for the most part, and a pretty safe way to start investing. And probably the majority of people don't really need a financial advisor to walk them through that. It might not be a bad idea for someone, if you pay someone to kind of look over your shoulder, like a fee only financial advisor, but probably paying someone part of your returns to manage your investments is probably not needed these days.
Yeah,
Would you agree
and
with that?
yeah, I don't think you could have stated that any better. I totally agree. And just to kind of go back to that point of just like how strong that limiting belief is. So as we started to unwind our investments and we realized like how bad the advice was and how much we were paying, my initial reaction was still just like, well, we just have to find a better advisor until we realized like, as you start to really dig in and learn about all the different models that people, that the way that advisors advise or charge you rather, they all come with their own conflicts. And again, like it was frankly just easier to do it ourselves. There's another non finance person, but a doctor, Jim Dolly. He goes by the white coat investor, and he really has a great quote that I always come back to. And it's like, by the time you know enough to know what questions to ask an advisor, you really know enough to just manage your investments yourself. And especially like it was harder for us because we had to unwind a lot of mistakes. But if you're just starting, I mean, it's very simple. So.
I would agree with that. I like the White Coat Investor a lot. I learned a lot from his website over the years. So we've got a few people in here. If you guys could like this video, the more people that like it, the more people that see it. And I think this is great information for all therapists, not only therapists, but any healthcare providers to hear, because, you know, financial advice is it's easy to come by, but it's expensive. So the more people that can hear about these things and realize that it doesn't have to be that complicated, the better. So in terms of financial independence and your financial independence number, could you just give a quick background on what financial independence is and kind of the math behind it and how you went about, you know, determining your own financial independence number?
Yeah, so I think I went from, I thought that financial independence is impossible. Normal people can't do it. And then I found these fire blogs and it sounds so easy, right? So you track your expenses, which is great advice. I recommend everybody do that because I think most of the time people spend whatever they earn. And even like retirement planning, they say, you're going to need to replace 80% of what you earned. And really what you need to retire has nothing to do with what you make. And once you hear this, it's so logical, but it never occurred to me until I read it in these fire blogs. But it's all about what you spend. So know your expenses. And then as you accumulate about 25 times that, and there's some research that shows that you can take about 4% every year, and you're not going to run out of money over the course of your retirement. So it sounds pretty simple. And, in theory it is. But to get to the point where you can save that much as quickly as we did, so by the time we're 40, we were saving a full professional salary every year. And now you're going from building up your investments and having this big buffer. So like I said, we say 50%, but honestly, that's not true because there was years we did bigger trips and we probably spent maybe $5,000 or $10,000 of my salary, and still on an $80,000 or $90,000 salary, you're still saving whatever, 90% of it. So it's not a big deal, but we had that freedom. And then there was other years where we probably did local adventures, and we probably out of my wife's income, we probably saved 10 or 20% of that on top of my salary. So, but you have all this freedom and flexibility. And now you go to this, like where you're drawing down your investments and you're stuck to a budget. And I would say kind of terrifying for me just because we are such natural savers. But even if it's not frightful, it's just not desirable because you're kind of locked into a lifestyle. So what we kind of realized is retirement isn't even what we wanted anyway. So since I have, I guess, retired as a physical therapist, and we can even get into that. I'm still licensed, so there is potential I could go back, but I'm really enjoying. I wrote a book, I'm writing a blog, and my wife, we talked about, she never went back to full-time work, but because she had all this flexibility and this freedom that we had, she ended up negotiating a work-from-home position. She works part-time, and she just ended up keeping it because she loves it. So basically, she's able to support us and save just on her part-time salary because our expenses are so low. And then I'm starting to make some money from my writing. And so I think a lot of people would criticize us because we're not really retired. And I welcome that criticism because I think like what I would question you is, what do you really want from your life? And basically everything we wanted, we now have as far as freedom with our daughter, freedom to be outside seeking adventure. And yet we're not stuck with that scarcity that comes with retirement. So we kind of look for these win-wins and how to get the best of both worlds.
Yeah, I definitely hear you on that. I was in a very similar situation. I guess I have only worked about 10 weeks in the last 15 or 16 months now as a PT. So I'm kind of in that position too, where I don't have to work as a PT anymore if I don't want to. But what's weird about having that ability is that it's not a bad job if you don't have to do it. You know what I mean? Like if I have the ability to work on my own terms, then I really don't mind the job as much. And yeah, I mean, like you said, with retirement, the weird thing about that, what I've really learned over the last couple of years is that like, what is retirement? You don't, it's not like you just stop working and then you lay on the beach or you just lounge around all the time. No one does that. Everyone has hobbies they work on. And so, pretty much what you're doing when you say you're pursuing financial independence or you're retiring early is that you're just designing the lifestyle you want and setting up things how you want it. And so that's kind of a lesson that I've really learned, is that, like, I had this goal in mind. I got to that goal. I thought things would be wonderful. Well, guess what? It's still the same. I just have to figure out what to occupy my time with.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something I'm definitely going to write about soon. But yeah, I'm glad to hear you say that as well. It's definitely something I've struggled with a little bit.
Yeah, just a couple of things to follow up on that. So, like, as a physical therapist, so again, like, I didn't really plan to retire. So my plan was actually, like, I know you said you've learned from me and you like my blog, but I was actually learning from you. And I kind of thought, like, well, what if I do one, even if it's a 6-week rotation a year, or at most 3 months? And by doing that, and we basically, again, like, because our expenses are so low and our earning power is high, like, we have the ability to basically cover our expenses or have a super low withdrawal rate from our portfolio. So that was my plan. I didn't even really plan to retire. And then these opportunities, the kind of the thing that I think a lot of people don't see, and the kind of, I think, saving is looks at as like sacrifice, but really what all that did is just open up all these doors. So I ended up retiring just because I had 2 just amazing opportunities that I couldn't pass up. There was a blog that I read, Can I Retire Yet? And it was super influential, and it's kind of where I got into the nitty gritty of, like, understanding the numbers. He was a hardcore planner, and, like, what would retirement mean? And I read his blog, and so I just reached out to him and I said, would you be interested in a partner? And he had a sizable blog. We have about 18,000 readers, and he said, yeah, actually, I was kind of burning out, and so I ended up partnering with him. And then we talked a little bit about the book, but I just wrote a book there's a really popular personal finance, financial independence podcast called Choose FI. And kind of a similar situation. I just reached out, and I kind of wanted to do a podcast because I talked about how I didn't see anybody that looked like me, but there's all these people, all these different stories, and I thought that would be great to share them. And these guys started the podcast doing exactly that. So instead of reinventing the wheel, I just reached out to them and I said, how about we partner and write a book? And they did. So before my last day of work was December 1st, 2017. And on December 4th, I started both of these projects that I had lined up that I had on the back burner. I couldn't wait to get to. So yeah, and there's just so many options that open up, and it's hard to predict that, and it's hard to understand that when you're just getting started, and it just seems so overwhelming. But yeah, it's amazing once you get out there and things start opening up.
I definitely hear you on that. What I realized since I haven't been working as much is that I find things that I want to work on that end up basically, I think the type of person that saves a lot and pursues financial independence is not the kind of person that's going to just be happy with a life of leisure. I think you start to realize that there's more to life than just getting to retirement and doing nothing. That you want to be productive, it makes you feel better. I mean, I can tell you on days that I don't do much, I don't feel that good. Even though when you're very busy, you want nothing more than to just do nothing. But too much of that is it gets too much very quickly. Yeah, I think pretty much everybody that goes down this path and gets to their goal number probably has similar realizations that, like, you still have to be productive. You still have to do something. If that something brings in an income, then that's wonderful. And then you have all these people that say, okay, we bring in an income, so you're not retired. Well, what else are you going to do? You have to do something that's meaningful to you. That's what makes you happy in life. So it's good to hear that.
And it's amazing to be able to kind of just dissociate working and earning money, because, like, so this past winter, like, I still have the itch. Like, I like being a physical therapist. I like doing that stuff, but I don't like having to go to an office and being stuck. So I started volunteering last year with the adaptive ski program. We live right by Snow Basin Ski Resort in Utah. And I started volunteering, and, like, they'd never kind of had anybody with physical therapist skills just showing up and working for free. And just from the ability to talk to clients and know how to interact with people to knowing how to lift. Like, we had a guy with a brain tumor, weighed about 250 pounds. And basically our job was just to let him board. And then when he fell, we would pick him up, and having somebody that can lift and do that stuff. And they actually asked me about, if I would want to become like a guide and, get trained. And I really didn't. Like, I liked being able to go and volunteer and do it on my terms and kind of pick and choose who I wanted to work with. And it was just an amazing freedom. And then, like, I do make some money from my writing, but, it's kind of something I can totally do on my own time whenever I want. And yeah, that freedom is just amazing.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Being able to volunteer, being able to do what you want to do, and yeah, dissociating income from work is, I think that's probably the best part about pursuing financial independence and getting to a point of relative stability. So yeah, I really agree with that. So in terms of the FI number we were talking about, you said 25 times. Is that what you used as a guide? And in terms of your expenses, you don't have to say an exact number, but like a range. What was your family at when you got to the point of financial independence?
Yeah, so I would say roughly we're in the ballpark of about $50,000 a year, and some people might think that's high and unachievable, and some people might think it's low. What I would just point out is that's 50,000. We have a fully paid off mortgage, so we don't have rent or mortgage payments every month. We don't have car payments because we are at this position of financial independence. I mean, insurance isn't even an option. Life insurance we don't really need. So a lot of these things that take up a lot of your spending for the average person, we don't really have. And then because we were able to cut down our income so much, we don't pay a whole heck of a lot in income tax. So, I mean, basically that's 50,000 of discretionary spending. So you can live a pretty nice lifestyle on that. Yeah.
I definitely agree with that. Yeah, I would say that's a relatively achievable number for most people. I mean, there's households that don't make that much. So if you're deliberate with your spending, and what I really like about your story is that you guys, like you said, you weren't overly frugal. You know, people have a hard time relating to what I did because I was very frugal, you know, living in the camper for a few years, traveling around in that. I mean, that's not something a lot of people can do. But you guys, you know, you had a normal middle class life. You had nice cars. You had really nice trips. I mean, I think you did pretty much, you know, what most people do. You just optimize that a little bit, and that goes a long way.
So can I plug my book here for a second?
Oh, for sure, yeah.
So
we actually have at least 2 questions right now asking,
perfect.
What are some of the books you'd recommend?
Perfect. So, I mean, so when I started writing my original blog, you talked about my Eat the Financial Elephant. And that was actually, I forget what our original tagline, but it was something basically about normal people, because we saw these people that were, you know, like I said, like ultra frugal spreadsheet junkies, and that just wasn't us at all. But what I realized is, so we did have 2 above average salaries. We did start without debt very quickly. We saved from the beginning, so we didn't have to dial back our lifestyle. So, like, I think there is no normal. Like, everybody's story is going to look different. Like, your story looks, other than the fact that we're both physical therapists, our stories are really completely different. They really couldn't be any more opposite. But there's a lot of overlap in principles. And so to get to the question of Anna, I see there. So my book is called Choose FI, Your Blueprint to Financial Independence. And what we did is we took just a bunch of people, high earners, doctors, low earners. There was like a couple that was in the arts community and lived in, I think, Los Angeles, so a high cost of living area. And so, like, some people do it through ultra frugality. Some people do it through what's called house hacking, where you buy a house and you live in one and you rent out the other. Some people do other real estate investments. Some people, like myself, are just index fund investors. There really is no one size fits all. And like, a lot of personal finance is very dogmatic. Like, this is what I did, just do this, which is perfect if you're me. But if you're Jared and you're coming out $100,000 in debt, or wherever you're at, you're going to have to find your own path. But the principles are really universal. So what we try to do is break down those principles and then give different examples of different people who did it in a variety of ways. And that way, like, what we're hoping you can do is, it's basically like a choose your own adventure where you can kind of put those together. And that's what we tried to do, because there is no normal. We're all going to have advantages and we're all going to have disadvantages, and we're all starting from a different place, and we're all going to have different goals. So, but you can use the same principles for everybody.
Yeah. And for you guys asking about books, I've read his book, and it's my favorite personal finance book. And I am a big personal finance nerd. I think I've read probably over 100 personal finance books in the last 5 years. But yeah, I really appreciate that it's more of, here's some options that you can do. You don't have to do all of them. They're all not going to work for you. Just like I was talking about earlier, what I did is not going to work for the majority of PTs. And that's the thing, is you just take these little lessons and apply them to your own life where you can. And I really like that about your book. And I think that you did a very good job addressing criticism that you would probably have gotten by saying that, like, you know, none of these things are going to fit everyone. You take what applies to you and use it. And yeah, I really appreciated the book. I think that was really good. In terms of any other books that you'd recommend, do you have any other recommendations, just from what other people have asking?
Yeah, so I think people in general just feel overwhelmed with investing. And the book, it actually wasn't a book at the time. It was a series of blog posts, but it got turned into a book. It's called The Simple Path to Wealth by an author named J.L. Collins, the letter J, the letter L, Collins. And just a spectacular book. And that really kind of made investing achievable to me. I don't think there's one book that because it's going to answer all your questions. But man, that book is pretty darn close. It'll get you started and it'll get you going. Again, my blog is Can I Retire Yet? I review a lot of books, and I've read a ton of investing books, and I kind of have like my 4 top resources on the blog. And I just reviewed like another book last week. There's a lot of great books, but I would definitely, if you're going to read one to start with, and if you kind of feel just overwhelmed, The Simple Path to Wealth is the place to start, in my opinion.
I would agree with that. Another couple that I would add, the Boglehead's Guide to Investing was really influential to me, and that's a lot of the same thing that is in The Simple Path to Wealth. But I think both of those together, getting information from multiple sources, especially combined with your book as well. I mean, you all hit on the same topics a lot for investing, and I think hearing that from different sources and seeing different citations and things like that, I think makes a big difference. And in terms of just living below your means, probably the personal finance book that had the biggest influence on me when I started was The Millionaire Next Door, and realizing that, hey, I don't have to do what everybody else is doing. Not only do I not have to do what everyone else is doing, but most of the people that do really well aren't doing what everyone else is doing. Mm-hmm. And that kind of goes along with the post you wrote for Fifth Wheel PT, choose healthy, not normal, because, in terms of health, in terms of finances, in terms of, pretty much everything in life, normal is not optimal. And it's usually nowhere near optimal. So you don't have to do what everyone else is doing. And, making these small decisions, whatever fits your life, whatever fits your basically that choose your own adventure you're talking about, whatever fits you, applying those principles makes a huge difference.
Yeah. And I think like everything that kind of got me to this different place in life that kind of looks pretty remarkable when you look back on it and now that you see me at the finish line. But like, as I was going, my life didn't really look very different. It was a couple there were big choices with housing and cars, so they had big impacts, but they were relatively minor, and we still had a decent house. We always were a 2-car family. So we had a pretty normal looking life, but by stacking some of these decisions and just doing things a bit differently, that's kind of what got us here. And as good as we did, like I said, I retired at 41 and after a 16-year career. I probably could have gotten here 5 or 6 years earlier, at least, if we would have been doing from the beginning the things that we did with our investments, with our tax planning. And again, that was just not questioning things. So yeah, it's really, it's kind of that I think it's an Einstein quote, but the definition of insanity is to do the same thing over and over and expect a different result. So if you want to get somewhere different, you have to take different actions than what everybody around you doing.
Yeah, and like you said there, sometimes we've done some school talks recently talking about, I'm doing my best to try to get people interested like I was. And in terms of expenses, like there's really 3 or 4 big things that you can just save a little bit on, and that will lead to huge differences down the line. And that's things like housing. You don't have to get the biggest house that you qualify for. Cars, you don't have to get a brand new car every few years. You can buy a car that's a few years old and drive that for a while. It's still a good car. It's still going to be safe and everything. Like you mentioned, advising fees, that's a big thing. And then the other thing is tax planning, like you've mentioned as well, is taking advantage of those tax deferred accounts, or even like a Roth account where you're paying the taxes up front, but then you don't pay taxes at the end. I mean, those things there, if you just take a normal life and you optimize just those 4 things, that changes everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And like the housing and the car stuff, people might cringe a little bit because it's very entrenched that that's just what you do. But I don't know anybody so once you have that difference and you can do the tax planning, I don't know anybody that wants to pay more taxes. And then once you start to accumulate some money, the investing fees, it adds 0 value to your life. And it's ridiculous when you these little 1% here and 1% there that seems so tiny. They add up and they just have a massive effect. So the things that once you get those basic things right, you're actually living better for less than most people, because you're cutting spending that adds 0 value to your life.
I really agree with that. So in terms of, you said obviously your wife's income helped on this journey. Was she on board with financial independence? Because I know Whitney and I have had, Whitney is definitely not on board as much as I am. And, I'm the one that researches things. I'm the one that spends a lot of time on this stuff. And I think she's come around a little bit. But what was your experience with that? Was your wife on board from the beginning, or was it something that, you had to convince her, or, explain the benefits? And was that something that she came around to, or how did that work?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. And it's really interesting for us. I think, again, kind of talking about everybody's path is different. Most couples, that's a really common thing, is getting your spouse on board. I had zero issue getting my wife on board. Like we started, like I said, from the beginning because we wanted to get out of debt, and then it just felt good because neither of us really had anything growing up. And so to be savers and to start building wealth and seeing that, it felt amazingly good. Where we actually ran into problems is like when we started this transition of, am I going to leave my job? What are we going to do? And like, so we're giving up that security blanket of the high savings rate. And particularly for my wife, who her family kind of struggled with money. It was terrifying for her to go down to where we are now, basically living on a tight budget and spending down. So yeah, we had to really work through that. And that's kind of how we ended up coming to the point where we were, where she was going to keep working part-time. And I was talking about maybe doing a travel thing. And instead I started doing the writing, but yeah, we just kind of had to work through that. So I think it's an ongoing, evolving process that you have to just keep communicating if you have a partner.
Yeah. I think that's true. Everyone comes into it from a different point, and obviously don't be forceful if you're in that situation, but explain the benefits and things like that. And not everyone is going to resonate with those things, and everyone wants something different from life. And if that's making them happy, then there's nothing wrong with that for sure.
Yeah, and to your point about like how just financial independence, I think a lot of times we get stuck in this idea. Like, so originally it's hard to get people on board, but once people get on board, it's like, I just got to put my head down and get to financial independence and everything will be perfect. And like, so we were poor college students when we started dating. When we got engaged, we were in debt, and we really never fought about money. And by far the most we fought about money is like as we were around that financial independence point. So again, like it's just something that everybody's going to be different and you have to kind of work through, but definitely it's not one of those things where like, it's a tale as old as time, but like money is not going to make you happy. Money is not going to solve all your problems. And so it's important to have a realistic expectations and to have a realistic plan that's going to be actually what you want.
Yeah, that is a tough lesson to learn. I think most people that are struggling with money, they think that that's going to be the source of all their happiness. And I think when you get to that point, you realize that that doesn't make you happy. Just obviously being financially secure gives you a lot more optionality, and it gives you flexibility, which is great. And there's definitely something to that, of course, but that's not just going to be the panacea. It's not going to be the source of your happiness. And that's something I've really come to terms with over the last couple of years. And in terms of, moving out of the workforce, I'm kind of in that same situation now. Whitney's about to take a travel contract, and I'm not going to be working for the first time. So she's going to be working 3 months, and I'm just going to be working on the websites and doing whatever I want to do, and we'll see how that works out. Maybe I'll like it, maybe I won't, but we'll see. I might end up going back to PT as well. But so you think? You still there?
Yep, lost you there for a second.
All right, yeah, I don't know what happened. But so you think you might end up going back to a traditional PT job at some point, or you think you still might do the travel contract thing?
I honestly don't know. So it's November now. December 1st, 2017 was my last day. So it'll be 2 years coming up here. And I'm still licensed in Pennsylvania, and I now live in Utah. So like I'm definitely not in a huge hurry to do it. But I think like by next December, that'll be 3 years. I think I got to kind of make a decision to either get a part-time job to keep my toes in it, like before my skills atrophy too much and I get too far out of it. But yeah, I'm not really sure. Like I said, I like definitely like the adaptive ski kind of scratched that itch a little bit for me. I do miss certain aspects, but I can't say like in the last 2 years, there's one day I woke up and wish I had to go to work. So it's like we talked about, it doesn't make everything perfect, but it doesn't suck either. So.
Yeah, definitely. So what does your life look like now? Are you still pretty disciplined in terms of getting up early, getting stuff done? What's changed in that regard? I think you're probably a lot more disciplined than me, and that's something I'm kind of struggling with right now. But how to set up things and stick to a schedule when I'm not forced to. So what does your normal day look like now?
Yeah, so I struggled with that initially for the first couple of months. And so kind of the routine that we've settled into, we have a now 7-year-old daughter. So we kind of all are kind of winding down, and we go to bed about 9 o'clock at night. And so I get up I don't really need an alarm clock, but I get my 8 hours, and I get up around 4:45, 5 o'clock every day. And that's when I kind of try to do my like writing or whatever I need to concentrate on work-wise. So I work until about 7 o'clock. And then whenever I hear her waking up, I go up and we just kind of hang out and have breakfast. And and that's till like 8, and I take her to school. And then from that point, my day is pretty much free until we pick her up at 3:15. So it just depends. Like we live in the mountains now. So like today I was out mountain biking. I know tomorrow we're going to climb. So pretty much every day I do something active where I'm moving, whether it's a quick workout at home or most days we try to get outside. Like last year, I think we skied 55 days or something. We had a pretty amazing winter. So something active outside. And then at other times, I might do some more work in the day. I might, like I do, my wife works more than me. So I do all the just house stuff, mowing the grass, cleaning, grocery shopping. So I'll take care of that stuff. So kind of just routine stuff that needs to be done. And then we're both kind of pretty much always wrapped up by about 3:15 when my daughter's done. And then we just have the evening to just do whatever family stuff. So
sounds like a pretty awesome lifestyle.
Yeah, it's not bad.
Yeah, I think I need to get in some kind of routine like that. I think that would help a lot. Because yeah, if you don't do much, you start feeling depressed, and that's never a good thing to do. So in terms of future plans, I know you said you're not sure about going back to PT, but are you enjoying where you guys moved to in Utah? I know you guys moved a couple years ago now, right?
Yeah, we're about a year and a half here. We're in Ogden, Utah, and yeah, we definitely part of it was just luck. I think like we hit the lottery with finding just the perfect neighborhood, like a ton of kids. So that's perfect for my daughter. We're like 3 blocks from the trails. So if we want to hike, mountain bike, rock climb, like we don't even have to move our car. We can walk to the trails, and we're about 20 minutes from skiing. So yeah, I mean, it's a pretty ideal location for the lifestyle we want to live and for this point in our life.
That's awesome. We actually did a road trip about a month ago now. We drove through southern Utah. Man, southern Utah, the national parks there were beautiful. So I can't wait to make it up north and see what that's like. Because if you had the choice of everywhere and you picked northern Utah, it must be a pretty awesome place.
Well, so I will say, like, we didn't have the choice of everywhere because, like, our criteria, we really wanted to live close to skiing, and like that narrowed it down, like, to a place that was affordable. And when I say close, like, we drop our daughter at school, we're on the first lift of the day, so like it's pretty nice. Like, so to live that close, like, it was basically 3 places in the country that was actually affordable because it gets pretty ridiculous in most ski towns. So Ogden's kind of a weird, eclectic town, but it fits us. It's a really nice fit, and we like it.
That's awesome. So if you guys have any questions about anything we've talked about so far, we have a few more things, and then we got some questions here that I'm going to go through that we got prior to the video. But real quick, so talking about the book, we talked about it a little bit earlier. How long did it take you to write that book? And I know you put a lot of effort into that because, I thought about doing something similar, and mine would have been nothing like that. That took a lot of work, I know. Was that a pretty daunting process?
Yeah, so it was more than I thought. So we moved on July 4th of last year. So I basically had like 7 months between the day I started, and I was trying to get it done before we moved. That was my goal. And I accomplished that goal. We just kind of hit the deadline and I had it done. But then writing a book is like the least time consuming part of writing a book. Like, so the editing process, rewrites, going through, finding a designer, doing all the graphics, then getting out and promoting the book. Like, there's just so much involved with it. So yeah, it's been quite a process. It's been a learning experience. It's something I would have thought I'd never, ever in a million years. Like, it makes me laugh. Like you say, I'm a good writer, and I've done some different interviews. I've gotten a lot of positive feedback, but I mean, we talk about, like, in the book, we talk about limiting beliefs. And one of my beliefs was like, I could never write. I wrote one case study that was published in JOSPT. When I was a grad student, and it got published, I think 5 years later, and it was a 5-page case study. Like, that's how long I procrastinated. Like, I always hated writing, but I just got so passionate about this topic is what got me into it. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
That's awesome. Yeah, I hated writing as well. And I still don't know why I started writing, but I'm glad I did. And I got actually an email the other day where somebody was like, oh, I really like your articles. And I was like, you must not have read many other articles because there's a lot better ones out there. But yeah, talk about your website a little bit. You're still writing about personal finance. I think you do weekly articles now.
Yeah, so I have a partner. So there's 2 of us, and we write basically a total of 4 articles a month. He does 1, and I do 2, and then we just do like a roundup where we take best articles from around the internet. So it's pretty not real labor intensive there as far as writing. I actually wrote more when I was working, but we're starting to do some things to kind of build out the website and develop some other products to kind of make it more user friendly. But yeah, the website's called Can I Retire Yet? And we talk about originally it was really about retirement planning, but we're kind of expanding that to like how can you redefine retirement? How can you build the lifestyle you want sooner, even if you can't retire? And we talk a lot about those type of topics too. So traditionally our audience was a little bit older, but we're diversifying that and we're getting a lot of new readers. So.
Yeah, I think your articles there are, you put a lot of effort into those. They're pretty in depth and long articles, which, yeah, I appreciate. I read a lot of personal finance articles, and some of them are, pretty brief and superficial, whereas I feel like yours are pretty in depth, and you do a good job with that. I know it takes a lot of time there as well.
Yeah, and that's what drew me to the site, and also just Darrow, my partner. I mean, he's just very not dogmatic, and that's kind of I try to have that too. Just kind of like find what works for you, and kind of given a lot of different options. So
That's awesome. So one of the last things I had on here was if you're happy to leave your PT job, which I think we've covered that now. You know, I'm kind of in the same position. I think that I don't not like PT, but if I could choose to not have to go there all the time, then I think that's it's nice to have that option. And I think that's why I write a lot about burnout, is because I think most people, if you have the option to do something, then you don't hate it. But if you're stuck going there every day, your expenses are the same as your income, and you're stuck doing that, you're going to start to resent it, even if it's a job that you like. And I think that's where a lot of the burnout in healthcare is coming from. It makes me really sad to see that in the PT world. If you're on any PT groups or forums, that is a very common theme, is that people are burning out. They don't want to, they regret their decision. And I think a lot of that has to do with people having so high expenses that they're stuck there. They can't decrease their hours if they want to. They can't take time off. So I think you can learn a lot from the information Chris puts out there, and just try to take those little steps to create some space between your income and your expenses, so that you're basically buying your freedom, and you don't have to worry about eventually getting to a point where you don't have to worry about having to show up to a job. I think that's or just not working as many hours, or working 1 or 2 contracts per year, like we've been doing. So I think there's a lot you can do with that.
yeah, and I would agree 110%. And if I could just add one thing to that is
Yep.
like there's always like that one person when you talk about this stuff that says, yeah, but I love my job. And like to me, that is all the more reason you should start learning about this stuff and doing it now. Because when you hate your job and then you start a 10 or 15-year process to try to save 50%, you're going to really hate your job and hate your life. But if you build this lifestyle now while you like your job and you're saving, I mean, there's really no downside. You're going to have options. I mean, the worst case scenario is you're going to have a lot of money down the road, and you can live a more luxurious lifestyle. Or if you decide you want to retire, or you want to cut back, or you have kids, and you want to spend more time with them, or a parent gets sick, a spouse gets sick, like anything can happen. And so if you love your job and you say, well, that's not me, then I would say that's even more so for you, that this is the time to do it. And it's hard for people to take that action. Like usually people need that triggering event, but if you can understand that and take action, even though you do love your job, you're not going to regret that decision. I promise.
Yeah, and I mean, that's ultimately what we're all trying to get to, is finding something meaningful that we enjoy to put our time into. And if you already enjoy your job, and you can reduce your expenses a little bit to have a cushion just in case things change, because as we know in healthcare, things can change at any point. I think a lot of skilled nursing therapists have found that out in the last couple of months with the PDPM changes. That was a big wake-up call for a lot of people. So there's a lot of people going along that they really enjoyed their job, and then all of a sudden everything changes. So yeah, having that cushion is never a bad thing. So I think that was a pretty good overview of what your philosophy. But if you had any advice for current students or new grads, what would you say? Or what? We had a question too about what advice do you wish you had gotten when you were younger?
Yeah, so I think kind of the whole theme behind our book, and it kind of was a book I wrote to a younger version of myself. So basically what I would say is just learn the rules. Is the advice that I give. And what I mean by that, it's really 2 steps. And the first step is you have to unlearn the rules that everybody just knows, right? Like, so everybody knows that, you go buy a house and you buy it based on what your mortgage is. Everybody knows you finance your cars. Everybody knows you're going to work till 65 because that's retirement age. Everybody knows all this stuff. Everybody knows you need to pay an advisor because it's investing is hard. And none of those things are rules, but people just know them. So unlearn all those rules. But then there are rules that matter. Like we talked about, there's some basic 8th grade math. If you just look at your saving as a percentage, that matters. Investing fees matter. Tax laws are laws. Those are rules. Like don't go stop paying your taxes. Follow the laws, but learn them and learn how to use them to your advantage. So unlearn the rules that aren't really rules and learn the rules that actually matter.
I think that's good advice. Yeah, I would definitely agree with all that. Okay, so let's go to some questions. We have a couple here. Asset allocation. So when you guys, I think you had a mortgage your whole time that you were pursuing FI, right?
We paid our mortgage off in about 7 or 8 years. So
Okay, well that's
most of the
awesome.
time. Yeah.
What was your asset allocation while you're paying down debt, and did that change at all once you were debt free?
So our asset allocation was initially just basically we did whatever our advisor told us. So we had, I think when we quit, like when we cut ties with him, I think we held 19 different mutual funds. And basically we owned domestic American large stocks, small stocks, and bonds, and that's it. And so now we own index funds, and we own, I think, 7 funds, and we basically own a diversified across the world portfolio and bonds. And so that's kind of what we do now. But it really had nothing to do with our mortgage and getting out of debt. It had to do with us taking control versus following the advice of an advisor.
Okay, yeah, I think that's I think that makes sense for sure. In terms of somebody asked about passive income, have you ever thought about real estate or anything like that to generate some sort of passive income?
Yeah, so real estate just never really interested me. When we moved, so where we moved from, we talked about it was a lower cost of living area, and really housing was not appreciating where we lived in Pennsylvania. And where we moved to in Utah, it's one of the hottest housing markets in the country. And so we bought our house a year before we moved, and we rented it for a year. And it kind of got me interested in real estate, but kind of like you said, like the person that can retire early is not going to retire. It's one thing that I'm kind of interested in, but it's not the most thing that I'm interested in. So in the book, we talk about 3 paths for investing to get to financial independence. One is index funds, which was our primary path when we were working and still is where most of our portfolio is. One is real estate, which I may dabble my toes in, but it's not my top priority. And then the third is just creating a business. And kind of where we differentiate that is not creating a job, but a business that you can work on. And kind of like we talked about a lifestyle business, kind of like what you're doing, kind of like what I'm doing, where it's not passive in the way that buying an index fund and just sitting there waiting for your dividends is passive, but it produces a lot more income for the amount of capital that you have to invest. I mean, at least it can if you're successful with it. So
Yeah.
those are the 3 paths, and I'm now focusing on that business path.
Yeah, like we talked about earlier, finding something meaningful. If you can find something meaningful that produces some income, that takes a lot of the burden and a lot of that fear away from people that are scared to take the leap into a financial independence type situation, leaving their job. I know that can be scary, especially if you're leaving a permanent job. For me, it hasn't been this big of a deal because I'm used to taking time off. It's I can go back whenever, take a travel contract. It's not a big deal. But for you, leaving a permanent job after 14 or 15 years, I'm sure that was kind of scary.
Yeah, and just to kind of clarify too, when I say a lot of income, because our expenses are so low, it doesn't take a lot of income. So when I say a lot of income, if you have a passive portfolio where dividends are 2% and interest is 2%, if you have $1 million portfolio, it's only kicking off $20,000 a year. So like for my wife and I, we have 2 competent adults with skills. If we wanted to pay our whole $50,000 of living expenses, that's only $25,000 each. That's like $2,000 a month. It's just not very hard to create something to do something like that. So I think a lot of people think, like we talked about, like you're not really retired, and a lot of people think bloggers make $100,000 or a couple $100,000 a year, because a couple people do, but I mean they're busting their butt or they're extremely lucky. But for most of us, we're not. But that $25,000 goes a long way when your expenses are only $50,000. So
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean that takes a lot of the worry away. I run into that a lot where people think that, or one thing I run into a lot is people saying, you're not really retired if you're working on a website, and how come everyone that retires early has a website? And I think that's kind of I guess survivorship bias, or you only hear from people that have a platform, obviously.
Right.
So you're not going to hear from all the other people that retired early and don't have a website. They're not out there talking about it.
Exactly.
So and I think that's a common criticism that when you think about it, doesn't make much sense, because you're gonna hear from the ones that write about it. So I think that's pretty funny.
Yeah,
All
we
right,
live in a
so
skeptical world, and that's valid. I mean, I think people should be skeptical, but that's why I tried to clarify that, just to kind of give it some perspective of what a lot of money is, just compared to a lot based on you need $1 million portfolio. So how long would it take you to work to build up another $1,000,000 to get that $20,000 versus what could you do that's pretty stinking fun and easy that you can earn $20,000 over the course of a year.
Yeah, for sure. And it's meaningful, and it makes you feel good, and it gives you, motivation to do things. I think that's worth a lot. So, in closing, what advice would you have? What kind of summary, what would you say to, what would be your closing words here?
Yeah, so I would think I would assume most of the people listening to this, if you're a physical therapist, you're probably not hardcore into the FIRE scene, or you're not real far down the path to financial independence. What I would say, the advice I would give is super simple. Just start, because it's really it seems unachievable. You don't see a lot of people doing it. It feels far off. But I can promise you, if you don't start, you're not going to be any closer tomorrow or a year from now or 5 years from now than where you are today. But if you just start taking couple little actions, and they will start building on each other. And it's amazing how fast that snowball starts rolling once you get it started. But it does take that initial motivation and that initial just get off the couch and do something. And there's a lot of things you can do. And as long as you're doing something to move the ball forward, you're not going to regret that.
Yeah. The Choose F5 podcast, I really enjoy. And I know that was a lot of the impetus behind your book. And what they say on there a lot is the aggregation of marginal gains. And that really resonates with me because, it's not huge differences. It's small differences that add up over time. And just trying to be a little bit better, a little bit more optimized in each category really makes a difference, not only on the expense side, but, on your investing side, which eventually leads to more income in the future. So anyone watching this that, you don't know where to start, Choose F5, the book is a great place to start. It's my, like I said, my favorite personal finance book. It gives you a good intro. It gives you some of those small steps that you can start taking to, get to a point where you don't have to be dependent on work income, and you can have more flexibility and options in your life.
Yeah, and if I could just kind of give one little plug to those guys, what I think they've done really well. I kind of thought the book was taking these leaders and taking a bunch of different stories, but really I think what's made them so successful and what's driving this whole Choose FI thing is they created local groups. And I would really encourage you, like if you're in this group, you've kind of already started to figure this out, that it's a lot easier to accomplish your goals if you have other like-minded people. But you can actually in person go meet with people in pretty much every major city, and even a lot of smaller towns and cities are starting to have these local groups. And I think they're just incredibly valuable. I mean, I would have, like looking back now, I would kill to have like the resources. Like I'm in the Salt Lake City area, and just seeing the people in that community, and we meet up like once a month, and it's just remarkable the things you can learn from people that are kind of have similar goals but are doing different things, and just learning from one another, helping one another, paying it forward, paying it back. I mean, it's awesome. And I would really encourage people to check that out.
Those local groups, that's something I haven't really got very involved with because we move around so much. But yeah, I would definitely, someone that's in a permanent job that's going to be there, check out a group in your area, because not only is it motivating, but people can share resources with you. Things like, who's the best contractor, who have you had success with, anything that you might have an issue with, someone probably has advice in that area for how to handle it. And I think that's incredibly valuable. So I think that's going to wrap it up. I think we went over an hour. So I think that was really good. I think there's a lot of good advice in there. Definitely check out Chris's book and his website, Choose FI. What's the subtitle for the book? Choose
FI, Your Blueprint to Financial Independence.
Okay. And then caniretireyet.com.
Yep.
Those are great resources. Definitely, hopefully this is motivating to you, and you can, start doing a little bit of research on your own and just start aggregating those small gains. And I think that will be a great path for most people. You have to realize everybody's story is not going to be the same. And that's why I really appreciate Chris's story. So thank you guys. If you guys are interested in my website, fifthwheelpt.com, I write a lot about personal finance, our own travels there. And if you're interested in Travel Therapy Mentor is the new website. But if you guys have any questions for us after this is over, definitely feel free to reach out. But thank you guys for watching, and take care.
Thanks for having me. That was fun.